Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at some of William Fevre's 2021 Chablis, and this particular one is a Premier Cru. It's Vaulorent, and as I say, 2021 vintage. So although Vaulorent is a Premier Cru, it's actually a continuation of the hillside where the Grand Crus of Chablis, the 7 top vineyards of the region, are produced. So there is only a pathway dividing Vaulorent from Les Prieures, the neighbouring Grand Cru. So it's fair to say that the soil types are very similar because it is the same hillside. The only real difference with Vaulorent is that the exposure of the vineyard is to the northwest rather than more to the south, which would be the case with the Premier Cru. So the sunlight exposure of the vineyard is not quite as good. The soils will be very, very similar. William Fevre, a premium Chablis producer, and they have something in the region of 76 hectares of vines, of which 15 are from the Grand Cru and a further 16 are from the Premier Cru. So quite a large proportion of their production is premium Chablis. The house was started in 1947 by, unsurprisingly, William Fevre. His family had lived in the region for over 200 years before he started the estate. I don't know whether they had vines or not, but this was an estate that he built up himself. And eventually, when he retired in 1998, he sold the company to Henriot, the champagne company, in fact Henriot Group, because the group included the Burgundy Negociant, Bouchard Père, and also there's a California winery that they own, sort of Beaux Frères. Now, William Fevre had been a little contentious in terms of his winemaking, in that he had used oak to ferment his wines, and in some cases had used a proportion of new oak, which was unfashionable in Chablis, where a lot of people were moving more towards using stainless steel as it became available. The company joining with Henriot and availability of old oak barrels coming from Bouchard Père has enabled the company to continue to use oak to ferment its wines and to age its wines, but actually means that to an extent the oak's been toned down a little because it's older oak. They're 6-year-old barrels on average they're using these days. Now, the ownership of William Fevre changed earlier this year in July 2023. Henriot Group were merged into another group, Artemis, and Artemis, amongst other holdings, are the owners of Château Latour in Bordeaux. The merger took place in 2022, and this year in 2023, Artemis sold William Fevre, the company, to Domaines Barons Rothschild, the owners of Château Lafite, one of the other great Bordeaux first growths. So this year, 2023, will be the first vintage in which the wine is made under the new ownership. William Fevre own somewhere in the region of 3.5 hectares out of the total of 17 hectares of the Vaulorent Premier Cru. The soils here, as I say, are very classic Chablis soils akin to those of the Grand Cru, where you have a clay marl over compacted limestone subsoil, which is probably about 80 centimetres below the surface, and this marl and soils are rich in fossils, the area having been a seabed sometime in the region of 150 million years ago. Fruit is harvested entirely by hand. When it reaches the winery, it's very gently pressed in a pneumatic press. It's pressed over a period of an hour and a half to 2 hours, so it's quite a light pressing. The juice then runs by gravity into a tank where it will settle, but it's not allowed to settle completely clear, as they intend to ferment the wine with its natural yeasts and conduct malolactic conversion with the naturally occurring bacteria. There's a need to retain nutrients in the juice. It's a light settling, and somewhere between about 40 and 50% of the juice is run into oak barrels, old French oak 228 litre Burgundy barriques, and their fermentation is allowed to start of its own accord. The balance of the juice is put into a tank, and that will ferment there. The wine will age for somewhere between 14 and 16 months. The first 6 months of that, the wine will be left with its fine lees, so the fine residue of the yeast left after fermentation remains in the barrel, and that will feed the wine a bit. It'll give it a little bit of richness, roundness, creaminess, so providing flavours and textures. Towards the end of aging, all the wine is put into stainless steel tanks just to allow it to harmonise and to settle prior to bottling. Now, 2021 was actually quite a challenging year, certainly in the vineyard. Started with some frosts, Thankfully, the Grand and Premier Crus would have been less affected by some of the other sites within Chablis, as the hillside sites allow frost to run down into the valleys. The season was relatively cool and quite humid, so there was actually a combination of disease pressure from fungal diseases and also with slightly reduced ripeness. So the wines have good fresh acidity and it makes them very precise. And actually there's a belief that the 2021s, although they were challenging to make, are actually really nice, precise, minerally expressions of Chablis, and that they reflect the terroirs. They've come off very well, because obviously wines that performed were those were from the best sites. So let's see what we make of it, shall we? Looking first of all at the colour, we have a relatively pale to medium yellow colour with plentiful greenish hints on that. As I swirl it, the wine is actually clinging to the glass fairly well. The label says it's 13% alcohol, so it's not a particularly viscous wine. It's a dry wine. There's not going to be any weight from sugar or anything like that in there. So let's see what make of the aromas, shall we? Gosh, the aromas are really a little bit restrained, but there's certainly a very clean mineral note there, a citric note, almost sort of lemon pith coming through there. Yeah, mineral crispness, and just a very, very delicate note of white peach. Quite restrained, but you know, quite precise in as far as it goes. So that's for taste. On the palate, the first thing you notice, I mean, it's completely dry wine. The first thing you notice is really crisp acidity. There's some tartness there. It's mouth-wateringly fresh. Yet actually, there is a creamy weight. This is a medium-bodied wine and really fills the front palate. There is a touch of sort of delicate white peach. There's a little bit of toastiness behind that. There's certainly a creamy texture, and there are creamy flavours start to come out towards the end of the fruit. The toastiness I don't think is coming from toasty oak. I think it's a toastiness coming from the fermentation aromas. That slight wild ferment note of gunpowder, gunflint, that sort of slightly mineral complexity there. It's quite a nice long finish. The alcohol's adding some roundness to the mid palate. There's a citric, lemony freshness, a pithy note coming through, just giving us sort of a mouth-watering and then creamy finish to the wine. It's lasting reasonably well. The initial weight that I saw at the front palate isn't quite following through to the finish yet. I don't know if that will open up. I suspect it probably will. I mean, the intensity of fruit there was very impressive. There was that initial rush of quite tart acidity. Now the sort of the creamy notes of the fruit have overlaid my tongue, and it is much more of that sort of lemon pith sort of note. It's not quite as sharp or tart, but those flavours are lasting really quite nicely. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. That was Chablis Vaulorent from the house of William Fevre. It's the 2021 vintage. If you've enjoyed the tasting, do feel free to press the like button, to share the video with your friends. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear what you think about the tasting, about the wines, or anything else related to that. It would be fantastic if you could sign up and follow us on YouTube. And most importantly, it would be really great if you could join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks for that. See you soon. Bye now.